I'd like to thank AMCA for having me. It's been a great conference, a lot of good presentations, a lot of good information. Today, now to the tough subject of BIM to FM. Definitely we've seen design, we've seen fabrication, and we know that that's, that definitely the tools are there, they're being used. But the one that suffers is definitely BIM to FM. So we'll go through some realities on that side. We'll say why does an owner want BIM to FM? What are the challenges? What are some of the emerging technologies in the field, which some have been touched on in the last couple days? UBIM, a product that we have, and more about how we go about it, more than the product, case study, and some recommendations. ENGworks is a global BIM service and product provider. So we're lucky enough to actually have clients across the whole life cycle. So we sell to architects, engineers, manufacturers, contractors, and owners. So for us, we get that tap of what's going on in real time, which helps us out to help our clients know the whole life cycle. So first for the owners, most of the owners today have three strategies. The strategy of having the drawings in a closet and the files and the CDs that they have to reference when need be. There's some owners who have basic Excel spreadsheets, update them periodically, but again, pretty static. And then the ones who are more advanced obviously employ a CMMS system or CAFM system, but today everything is manually entered. I think it's important to understand that, as crazy as it sounds, the owner actually has the most to gain in the BIM process. Because every building is about 60 to 65 cents on the dollar is going to be spent in operations and maintenance. That's a lot of money. And the waste that they have because of the data interoperability is approximately 60% too. So if we're able to bring BIM and give them data straight through, that's huge numbers. So most people in the United States, even that have gone through BIM to FM, what they're playing off are a couple studies that, I mean, through time, this is 2004, but definitely the way that they manage their data and asset management, it's inefficient. They're losing 12% on an annual basis, which equates to near 23 cents a square foot. And again, I saw a graph in another presentation yesterday that shows how we re-enter data over and over through the phases, and the owner actually takes on 60% of that hit. So I think, again, for us to get that, the owners in BIM to FM involved is huge. If we are able to have the owner get some of that data, he's got three things already that he can get that actually can happen today. He's going to get complete data as soon as the building is completed. He's not going to wait 5 months after the building is done where data's coming in and it's disorganized. So, and again, we have clients that actually will spend between $250,000 and $1 million, if you can think of that on facility, to put that data in by hand into a Maximo or Archibus. So think of that return on investment. If we're able to bring that straight through, the return on investment just from a data entry point is huge. Obviously, if we do have a process of getting the data bridged from BIM, we can populate and integrate with the CMMS, CAFM systems, the building management system, in anything really that is database driven, which is pretty much everything in the market. And obviously then add in the 3D component. So today, most of these CAFM systems, almost all of them, they're 2D based. So you can get data, but you really don't have a lot of rationalization to a 3D model. Obviously improves performance across their facility. Now, if they're able to access real data quickly and see what's going on, they can diagnose problems, be better on the preventative maintenance, and improve the building performance. Yesterday, Bob was asking, where are the CAFM people? Where are the CMMS companies? They're nowhere because there's no answer from their point. When you get to all of the CAFM systems in the world, they are all 2D and database driven from 20 years ago. And for them to play in our game, they would have to rewrite the whole platform. So even someone like Maximo or Archibus, they have no plans to be in the 3D worlds. There will have to be a third party in between to tie to their database. Again, they got installation of 10 million users, Archibus maybe 5 million. So obviously you're not going to sit there and reinvent the whole wheel again because it's pretty big if you're going to tie to that. And some of the integrations that we've been involved in, the unfortunate part is that when you deal with a lot of these guys, they don't know what, they can't tell you what they need to get from us. So from the point of being with the client says, okay, we're going to do BIM. We put in certain parameters, help the owner decide what are those parameters that he's going to pass through to the CMMS. And then we'll go to a Maximo and Archibus and say, well, how are we going to throw that data to you? And that could take 9 months. Since most of those are custom installations, it's really hard when the people you're trying to integrate with don't have a lot of answers. Those CAFM systems like a Maximo, and I think it's important to see that they're asset management only. I mean, one of the problems is that the asset management programs do not suffice for the facility manager or the building engineer. Studies show, and the people that we talk to, they could have a $4 million installation of Maximo, but the building engineers don't even use it. They don't like the interface. Obviously you guys know that a lot of times people are carrying those drawings around and they know what's in the facilities, so they're just doing what they've done for 30 years. But again, BIM can help them because we're talking about systems and preventative maintenance and the things to them that matter, where those guys do not care about asset management. So again, I think one of the issues and the important part is that we have to educate the owner. A lot of times people go to the owner, well, what do you need? That's a loaded question to them. There's not going to be any answer because most owners either have an outside or FM is a different department. And because the building engineer is not even involved in this, then when you talk about equipment or the things where the main payback is, you're going to get no answers. So as an industry, we have to be proactive to help them out because, again, if BIM is going to be a platform, everyone's got to win. So, okay, so design and construction, we see we can win. But at the end of the day, if the owner wins, the owner is the one that has the biggest portfolio of buildings, the one with the most money. And so it is important for them to be able to drive the technology, but they have to have something to gain. And in reality, if you don't give them anything for their asset management, they really don't care about the rest of the stuff. It's that they get the building, they write the check, and if there's wins for us on construction and engineering, great. But in order to get them involved, we have to give them return on investment. And for them, it's a vicious circle. If you look at the lack of content we have in the market, there's a lot of reasons for that, but the owners could drive more building of content. If you're General Motors and you use BIM and you approve their Spec 1, when you go to a manufacturer and say, hey, GM, if you're going to do it, you need to be in there because they've approved your product, and if you don't have it, you're not going to play. That's a way to force manufacturers to do it. Engineers, architects, us asking for content, that's a hard job, because especially in emerging markets, because it's always, well, how many seats are being used in Revit? Well, I don't know. Same problem we had in the US, right? In the first 3 or 4 years, it's like, yeah, that sounds great. How many people are using it? And then it goes on deaf ears. So a lot of presentations. We've seen the BIM Execution Plan. And I think everyone pretty much has the same take on those. I think most of them lack any kind of deliverable at the end to the owner. They're very design-centric, and that's a problem because, again, they need to be involved because we want to carry it through the whole life cycle to drive the industry. Obviously, if there's no return on investment for them, then then they're not going to give us any data, which again, in turn, I don't think is an industry we want. Obviously, I heard yesterday we've all seen those 300-page BIM execution plan. I mean, how realistic is that? I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes things are just made way too complicated on that side. And again, I think we all can agree, obviously, I don't think it has to be complicated for the owner to be involved. Bigger clients that we've dealt with, I mean, seriously, it may come down to that they need 18 parameters at the end. We're not talking about so much complex data to pass on to them. And so I think it's very doable, but of course we have to collaborate with them to understand what are those 18. And obviously we're going to go through the headache of figuring out what their existing process is. If they have no process, then it's going to be even a little bit more difficult. So, content. We all know that that's a huge problem. Yeah, I think a lot of times in the industry, and I think it was just said in the presentation before, that people look at content as their competitive edge. And in BIM, it's ridiculous because it's going to be passed on. So your design or your expertise is what's going to carry you to be hired. It's not going to be the content you build. But one of the things that you see in a market here early is that obviously you have to build content. We have some in the United States, like 15%, okay, so it's not humongous, but we do have enough to go on. But I think let's fast forward in some of the things that we do of what comes at the end and what is an advantage from the facility management side. The first thing is the manufacturer is always going to be the boss. If we go 5 years ahead, it is the manufacturer's job to give us the content. They're the ones who have to give us the specs and back it. They have to change management, when something changes with their product, right? So if you think, when you think of 500 pieces early in a market, people think, oh, I'm going to handle this. But what happens when you have 100,000 models? As designers and contractors, we're not building that content. We won't even want to manage it. We're going to want to know that we can go get that piece and put it in. And through the life cycle, whether you're pointing to different data, that's the manufacturer's side. Sometimes I think that's missed. And from the point of carry it one step further, we talk about in design and contracting about carrying that phase content. But again, the interesting thing is the holy grail, if you will, is when FM becomes proactive instead of reactive. When a piece of content is used through and that data passes on to the final owner, and that owner can hit that piece of content or link back to the manufacturer to see, hey, has this discontinued? Is there a replacement for this piece? And carry it one step further. Can I buy this online? That is what companies are looking at now because we call that syndication in the content business. But if you think of that, it makes sense. But again, for a manufacturer, where's most his money? O&M, right? He sells the product, but the key is, can he get to the owner to sell him parts and maintenance pieces, right? So again, I think that's something in mind to just remember that the manufacturer will be the boss, we hope. Because if they don't, it won't be sustainable or scalable from that case, because as we get moving and there's so much, they will be the end game. Obviously, as we know why there isn't much, the lack of standards, and obviously Australia has taken that into their own hands, which is good. But even when you have standards, we get into this point, even in the United States, where it's hard to pass that content from phase to phase. For instance, in the US, we stop at design and Revit, and we go right to fabrication. It's a dead stop. And the problem is that when you get into those fabrication programs, the data is a lot less. If you look in a fabrication model, a lot less. Like you could go from 200 parameters to 4. So what happens when you do have that hard line? How do you pass that pump from one platform to another? And at the end, what happens at the end if we have to get it to FM? That's an issue. So that certainly impedes this whole thinking. I think that some of the problem from the owner side is that the industry tries to brush off in an easy way, trying to simplify the process to FM, like Kobe. I mean, at the end of the day, I think just like we were talking in BIM execution plans, I believe each owner is different. Because each owner is going to use a different product. Each owner will have a different, even carry it to SAP or other kind of things. There's going to be a plethora of options for them. So to say that I have this BIM execution plan that is just popped out and usable for everyone is impossible. And so the problem with Kobe is that, whatever, let's say we're going to pass 9 parameters. Well, most of the time that's not going to be good enough. And yet the industry does need a standard. But I think that these are just, the lowest common denominator in these parts. We're sitting there adding so much data, so much information in these models, that just from the presentations and the power we're putting in the model, and then we're saying, well, let's dumb it down. Same as IFC, which, overall there's an argument every day on this, but I say, why don't we have better APIs from the software companies, right? Why we add all this data and we get into IFC in an exportation mode, which is 20 years ago we were exporting. Now everyone's got to export, and there's a degradation. It doesn't make sense to have it when we need a live model with more data to now export and degrade. I don't think that's the answer for the industry. So again, I think there's confusion there because we kind of just wipe our hands in the beginning saying that, hey, Mr. Owner, we'll pass you Kobe. And the owner says, well, he doesn't know what that's going to do for him. And there has to be a lot more guidance on that side. So when we pass to FM, at least from what we see, owners really want to own data. They do not want to own platform-specific files. There's not an owner who has Revit. There's not an owner who wants to run Navis. They want to run their CMMS system, and that's it. And so the problem is when we get data, it has to be platform agnostic. And the industry doesn't have much of that. Because again, when we're opening 2013 file in 2050, you're probably going to hope to have data. Because there's going to be new technologies that will come up. Hey, 5 years from now, we'll have a new technology. If the owner has the data, graphically and metadata, then you can force that data into the new product. But if it's in a platform, then we're going to talk about now integrating and hope to God we can pass it through. So owners want to own data. And so for us, passing models is not at the end what they want. It's much more simpler for them. And in the market, the 4 and 5D products that are excellent, at the end of the day, they do not have a true pass-through to CMMS. So that's another issue. So even if we're using the 4D and 5D tools, there's still integration that needs to be done at this point in all those products. So that's another hindrance from the program side. Emerging technologies. Obviously, well, this has been brought up in other presentations. BIM servers, you know, most products are going to be cloud-based for scalability. I mean, it just comes to a cost of people affording desktop solutions and updating and having different OSs. So at the end of the day, pretty much on the table is cloud-based. I think a lot of people, was brought up the other night about security. But at the end of the day, most of the infrastructure backbone companies that serve the clouds, you can choose different securities, and some of them are ironclad. So, you know, at the end of the day, these are probably much more secure than what you'll want to do in most cases. RFID. In the States, this is a big thing right now. It's very interesting. From the fabrication side, guys are fabricating pipes and all kinds of things, put the RFID on, and they've actually programmed the fabrication software to change colors depending whether it was coming out of their factory, whether it's in the middle of shipment, and then turning green when it was installed. So very interesting on that side. Obviously, RFIDs can be buried in concrete, can be buried in something, so you can get details about other things without actually seeing it, like a barcode. So that's the big advantage on that side, is visibility. Obviously, and when you're moving things, you're going to know where they move to. So again, that's being used right now. So yesterday, I think in one of the presentations, there was an example of augmented reality. There's a lot of work being done on that. Obviously, geospatial, trying to make sure whether you get on site and you can map up to the model, whether you can walk through it, whether you can tag something. So that, you know, there's a lot of people looking at that, and a lot of universities actually doing good research. Energy. I mean, this is the other big thing for owners that we find that owners ask, is that energy is maybe the number one thing other than asset management. There's companies that want to know, hey, how much is my real-time energy use? How does that compare to the design? And how does that compare month to month, day to day? Is my equipment maybe running down a little or need to be tweaked? So this is done today, but only on the building side. But as time's going on, we want to get to even equipment side. So today maybe we looked at buildings got 1,000 kW, but it'd be nice to know what the pump was running at. And so people are working on that from the singular side. And then running calculations, carbon footprint, that type of stuff. There's what we call in engineering freeform profiling. As engineers, we calculate the energy in an envelope fashion more statically. We'll do a conference room. But at the end of the day, our usage is, you know, whole numbers, and that's how many hours, how many people. But there's companies, and I've seen it, where they're working on actually getting the data back from those sensors in very short time frames, and then redoing the energy analysis to actually send and reset the sensor in a freeform profile, which is the most efficient. The only thing today is the sensors actually cannot take the technology, but as they improve, these are the things people are working on. And again, for the owner, trending after he has a model is a big thing. We build one hospital, we see how it goes, our design, we see the real, you know, what's really going on. And as time goes on, if we learn some stuff, we can do that on the next hospital. So those are some very interesting things. Couple years ago, because we were in the field of building content and obviously helping the market, we saw that there was no way to get the data to FM. So we started on a trip to create a platform agnostic transfer of data, not only from metadata, but the graphics too. Because at the end, our owners would tell us they don't want to buy software, they don't want a huge input cost or renewable cost. So a cloud-based product is about your only answer on that. And So what we did is we also took in fabrication models, which no one in the market can do. So most people concentrate only on Revit. The problem is, as you heard from Steve in the United States, hey, we have more deliverables of fabrication models than we have in Revit. Now what do? You do nothing. So we created something that could actually take the data of the graphics and metadata from different platforms, Bentley, fabrication, Revit, and turn it into agnostic database that we in turn now could throw to anything. We could link to BMS. We could link to their CAFM, their CMMS. You name it, it won't matter. It's in a database. So at that point, it's a mapping exercise, which for us, at the end of the day, it has to be, because you aren't going to dethrone products that are in these companies, right? Because they spent millions. They entered all this data. I mean, to go in and say, hey, Mr. Owner, get rid of Maximo. I'm going to give you a product. He's going to go, okay, well, how much is that going to cost? And you're going to tell him the price, and then you're going to walk out. I mean, is what's going to happen. So our opinion is that we're creating a bridge from BIM. And again, like we say, we don't have the same wants at the end. The owner needs data. The owner needs asset management. The owner hopes to do maybe recalculate energy. For us, when you start in the design process, we're very graphic intensive. But as you go through the life cycle, the graphic diminishes and the data goes up. So again, in our thought, it's give the owner what he needs, but at the same token, let's not tell him he needs to redo everything, because like Bob yesterday with all of those buildings he's got, the reality is 85% of portfolios are in 2D. So again, we can't throw out all the old. I mean, realistically, the dream of going to scan all those buildings is not realistic, to be honest, because there would be no return on investment for the owner. If I say, hey, Mr. Owner, it's 400 grand to scan your building and have a perfect BIM model, what does that do for him, right? Helps him a little, but is it going to be 400 grand worth? Probably not. So I think it's just like anything else. When we have new technology, yes, we want to go forward with the new technology. But at the same token, we can't throw out what was done for the past 100 years. It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of times I think that's what owners feel when people come in and misrepresent it. It's, hey, we have this new thing and everything must change. And I think that's why a lot of them just, clam up at that point. Here's a picture of Maximo. Again, I mean, once you're in a database, it's endless. And again, this is, as you guys can see, this is something probably looking at it in 1985, right? So again, if we have data and you need these 7 grayed out boxes, we'll pass you those 7 grayed out boxes, no problem. BMS, I mean, this is another thing. I mean, in the way that we look at it, there are solutions out there that want to regurgitate data from existing BMSs in different products. And from our point in experience, that's a mistake. Because let's say BMSs. So what do we got? Honeywell, Johnson. You keep on going down the list. Siemens. Okay, if I tell you I'm going to write a program and take all of those platforms in, every time they change their platform, which is every year, you spend $250,000 and then I charge you $100,000 because I'm taking the data stream from, doesn't really make any sense. I mean, the point, what's better is to tie to that BMS that's already there, because obviously Johnson Controls is going to spend a lot of money improving their system every year. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. So what we're saying is, again, we're in a model that is, if you will, a pointer to everything else, or a supply of data to everything else. But we don't want to recreate the wheel in the existing platforms. So for us, if you have a VAV box in a room, the method is you have the model, you have the unique identifier. What we're doing in the end, everything's web-based, is we're tying to that unique identifier. So you're in VAV, in room 101. Well, when you hit it in the model, then it's going to go to that in Johnson Control to room 101. You're going to have all the stuff that you're used to seeing. You can manipulate the controls from there and go forward. But again, not to recreate those wheels. So that was kind of our goal on that side. So this is a case study. This job is probably the most looked at hospital in the United States. This was a new facility, 650,000 square foot. Robinson Morton, who's top 5 builders of hospitals in the United States. This was a plan that went well. Maine General had, this is not a huge group, had 3 existing hospitals pretty large. They were building this facility, which was pretty large. They used Maximo for the other 3, so they went down that path and everything was fine. But they believed in BIM that it really could help them all the way through. So it was a true IPD job, contractually and incentive-based on that side. Matter of fact, there was no engineering model created in Revit because as the team deduced, the engineer did not have enough experience in the Revit. I mean, in doing the Revit. So because of time frame, they wanted to do it pretty quick. It was agreed upon that they helped the contractor. The contractor modeled it in the fabrication. Actually, some of the engineers helped model the fabrication. But that sped up the whole process. So there actually wasn't even a Revit engineering model on this job. The amazing thing why it's looked at is, as you can see, it was like a 36-month job and it's 9 months ahead of schedule. So pretty amazing, pretty hard not to look at that. And again, it's like that was said in a lot of these presentations. I mean, it's people communicating. At the end of the day, that's it. I mean, you get a group that was committed throughout. They had the incentive pool. And I think in some of these things we talk about IPD, but at the end of the day, a good group is going to perform the same way. IPD, in my opinion, is a way to help people work together, if you will, by being incentive-based, but it's not that a good group can't tackle those same issues. So they used fabrication, obviously architectural, I mean, windows, everything was pre-ordered and stuff was coming to the site, so it was pretty amazing, and it's almost done here. For us, obviously, we had won the job. We went up against Ecodomus and IBM and a bunch, and we were happy to win that one. And on this job, they used BIM 360 Field, and obviously they have IBM and Siemens on this job. So it's our job to tie to these items, and we're in the middle now, really waiting because sometimes the BMS is slow to the field, and BIM 360 we're working on. They use high-definition laser scanning for deflection and things going on during the construction. So it yielded very good results. I think the prefabrication, we talked a lot about it, and Steve said how much fabrication's done in the United States. This was very interesting. Obviously, these patient rooms, these head walls were completely done. Completely assembled and tested and sent to the field. As much detail as the furniture maker was getting templates to cut out the electrical holes, everything. So it was pretty amazing. And by the due date and how quick it is, you can see it worked. Obviously, haven't heard too much in these presentations about lean construction. In the United States, I mean, it's almost like you can't escape that for architects and contractors. Lean is always brought up. So, BIM is a great facilitator of lean construction. I mean, it's like I say about IPD, BIM, and lean construction. I mean, they go hand in hand. IPD is more, in my opinion, the mental side or the communication side. BIM is the center and facilitator to keep track of what's going on in lean construction. So I think, obviously all of them feed into each other. But again, they found lots of savings on waste. And obviously the RFIs were definitely diminished. I had asked Adam at Maine General, I asked him a few questions. I asked him, what did he plan to save annually from doing that versus his other 3 facilities, and that was his answer based on those initial studies, which he said him and his colleagues, knowing both sides of it, were realistic, but using the $100 a change order and that type of stuff. And then I asked him what would he say to owners who say, I don't know if I really believe in that. And obviously, the first thing he said is capturing the data, because for them, that's huge. You guys know in a hospital, that's why when people come to us and say, hey, can you give us all that data in our hospital? What data? How much do you want? Do you want to go in the ceiling? If so, you don't want to know how much that is, right? And the reality is in a hospital is that half the time you can't even get in those ORs, or they're drywalled up. So getting the dream that you're going to get good stuff after this thing's built is rough. And it's actually, the cost won't warrant itself to return on investment. These were some other answers continuing on that. Again, from his case, he's saying, hey, I'm giving my guys who are working in the field the best advantages that I can to work quickly. Obviously, we talk about the mobile devices. And here in the other paragraph, again, he's talking about what is he going to do after it's built? How is he going to get that data? They have 3 other facilities that now they want to do, but they will never get that amount of data that we get through the BIM model. And again, at the bottom, he's just re-emphasizing that, again, they're going to pay big money on the life of the building. That's where all the money is for those guys. So again, he's going to get savings year after year of having good data. So it's really a no-brainer, other than actually doing it and collaborating. Some takeaways. I think at the end of the day, and the United States is just as bad on the FM side. So this is a global, no matter where we go in the globe. Emerging markets, it's worse because there's no design models. But builders are still doing BIM models because they get collision detection. And if they can pass the owner FM, they both win, even though there's not a design in Revit, which is good, because at the end of the day, in a market, it takes time to get good models. Frankly, in the United States, still, these models, there's improvement that needs to continue on them. So it takes a market a while. You have to work in it. Training doesn't mean that overnight you're magic in Revit, as you all know. You have to use the product. You have to know where it doesn't work, where it does work. So I think engaging owners in a deeper conversation about what they need would help us. Because again, if the owner wins, the whole industry is going to win, no matter where that occurs. And it's going to help us get more content. It's going to more success stories. And those guys have the money. So again, let's face it, the more we can bring to the table through to them, then they'll be able to do more things we can't think of. They may want to, do something else with that data. So I think it's important. I love what you guys are doing with the national standard, and I think that's a great thing, and I know that the content and doing that stuff where everyone has a fair shake, obviously, improves adoption, and I think it's a great idea. Never happened in the U.S., but definitely I think it's the right track, because, again, that's what hinders a market, right? In the emerging markets, you read stuff, we'll peruse, briefs or RFPs, and it's like you read this thing and you go, like you got 10 bids, they're all going to be different. The thing, give me BIM, right? What does that tell anyone? So again, to have a standard obviously lets everyone really start on that side, and like a lot of presenters have said, if we wait for the manufacturers, that's going to be a while. So we don't want to stop doing the technology. We'll just have to bite the bullet for now, and every day hope it gets a little better. And again, I think, if we include the owner in, BIM integration has got to be a focal point. You know, a lot of times, you know, we're focused only on our part. We're designers. We look at that. We're contractors. We look what we need to get our job done. But a lot of times it's hard, and people don't look cross-phasing, and that's very important because, again, it's communication, and there's proof in projects that were here in presentation in the U.S. When people collaborate well and put everything on the table, if we throw the owners in for something to them, that's what's going to be the best at the end. And again, some of the things worldwide that we do, obviously we help people as a consultant because we're, if you will, maybe a third party. But in some instances, if consultants are going to know more about FM, you know, bring them in. Because again, I mean, you know, there's a core competence in each one of the phases. And I think that's why we throw Kobe or we throw things out, because it's not our core competency. As designers, okay, we want to give them stuff for FM, but, you know, asset management and all that stuff, it's a whole science. And it's not in our barn. So, again, that's what I would recommend. Thank you.